getting your corners aligned by depth chart, something that people probably don't use too often. And I think there's some really good advantages. So let's just talk about when you get your corners aligned, you have the choices, okay, of using balanced depth chart, which is basically putting your corners in right and left position, okay? So whoever's your number one corner is going to play right of screen corner. Whoever your number two corner is going to play left of screen corner. And whoever your slot corner is in your depth chart is going to be your nickel slot corner and play in the slot. Then you have the good old overall, which is pretty obvious. The number one overall highest rated corner is going to match up versus the number one overall highest rated wide receiver. And then, continue down the line. There's by speed, obvious. By height, obvious. Route running, obvious. But by depth chart, this is where it's a little bit different. And this is really a specific ability to, not an ability, but just this privilege to be able to say, hey, however I set my depth chart up, I can make sure that my guys in my depth chart can match up to the receivers based on by overall. Now, how is this and why is this important? Okay, let's just talk about what I've seen in the NFL. All right, so the New York Jets back in the day when they were good, they used to have a guy named Darrelle Revis, right? And he was known for being able to lock down the best receiver every year, right? Easy, every game, Revis Island. However, okay, when he first got into the NFL. One of the things that people did with him, and I know Rex Ryan did some of this stuff, so that's, in the prime of his career as well, they would say, hey, Revis, go play the number 2 receiver, okay? Go play the number 3 receiver, all right? And what I want you to do is to take him out. You're going to get no help. And then we're going to set the defense up and double team the other guys. We don't need Darrelle Revis as part of a double team. He can go basically erase another receiver, but more importantly, you're forcing the offense to possibly have to throw at the only guy who's not double teamed, and that's being covered by your best corner. So that's the reason why I like this depth chart, and I'm going to try to set it up that way, okay? But first, let me teach you how to just use it and how it works from a very basic level, okay? So I'm using the Rams defense. I'm familiar with them. I'm just going to set it up how I like to get it set up just from the beginning, just for this really kind of to go through these examples here, okay? So Ramsey is the number 1 corner. I put Troy Hill at the number 2 position, and I put David Long at the number 3 position, okay? That's just the normal depth chart here, all right, for corners. And then you also always have to look at your substitution depth chart, your sub depth chart, and look at your corners for nickel. And I want Troy Hill to be my nickel corner, okay? And Grant Haley would be my dime corner, okay? So right now, the way this works is if a team comes out in base personnel, which is what I call 21-12 personnel, when they have 2 wide receivers on the field, the depth chart is going to match up very naturally the way it should be. So Ramsey's my number 1 on my depth chart at corner. He's going to match up on the number 1 overall wide receiver, okay? And then Troy Hill is my number 2. He's going to match up versus the Seahawks, in this case, number 2 wide receiver. So let's take a look at the Seahawks and their wide receivers. Now, again, teams can move players around and do what they want, okay, and put them in different spots, but we're going by overall. This is the default roster here, and Tyler Lockett is the number 1 wide receiver by overall here, so it's a little bit different, okay? DK Metcalf, who I expected to be a higher rating than this, he actually is the number 2 overall wide receiver, and Marquise Goodwin is the number 3 overall wide receiver. So if they come out in 21 or 12 I Formation Pro, for example, Ramsey's going to match up on Lockett, and Troy Hill's going to match up on Metcalf, okay? So that's the beginning of that. Now, let's dig deeper, because I wasn't even expecting this to happen. I want Ramsey to play versus Metcalf, right? I want him to match up on Metcalf. Can't do it by overall, right? Overall won't let you do it, because if I go overall, it's going to put Ramsey on Lockett. So let's go back to the corner depth chart, all right? And let's take a look at moving Jalen Ramsey to the number 2 position in my depth chart. That's going to match him up versus DK Metcalf at the number 2 wide receiver overall rating, and let Troy Hill go up against Tyler Lockett. Okay, so now let's back out and let's actually see how this works. Okay, so I'm going to come out and just any 2 wide receiver set. All right, I'll just come out in close. All right, and then I'm going to come out on defense with a base set here. All right, I'm going to come out in 3-4 Will Sam 1. Okay, just a man defense. So let's see what we got going on. I have Ramsey, right? He's at the number 2 position. He's going to match up on the number 2 wide receiver overall in this case, which is DK Metcalf. Perfect, right? And then now on the other side, we have Troy Hill matching up over Tyler Lockett. Okay, so that's how you get that matchup. If that's the matchup you wanted. Let's say that's not the matchup you wanted. Let's say you want to put Ramsey on Tyler Lockett in this case, right? So when you go to your coaching and you start the game, you do this before the game, you know. But basically, you have a plan and you go with it. I want to put Ramsey back at the number 1 position. All right, I'm going to call any type of man defense. Doesn't matter. It can be coverage. It can be a 0 blitz if you want. But now Ramsey's going to match up over Lockett because that's the highest rated receiver, and Ramsey's in the number 1 spot. And now Troy Hill's going to match up over DK Metcalf. Now, if I'm really worried about DK Metcalf, I can take, let's say, the safety, right? And just say, hey, we're going to play a 0 style coverage. Nobody's going to be deep, but we're going to double team DK Metcalf, right? With a lesser corner and a safety. And we say we take the chances that Ramsey's going to win versus Tyler Lockett one-on-one with no help. So there you see how it works out there. That's how it works. Now, let's get into the real meat and potatoes of this bad boy. And let's look at when you go up against 3 wide receivers, okay? Because you're going to get more of that than you're going to probably get more of 2 wide receiver sets. So like I had said, the top 3 players that they have here, and they can put whoever they want on the field, all right? But the top 3 rated players is what you see right here, okay? So let's go to defense and let's try to figure this out. Now, this is the part that took a little while for me to understand and how it's programmed in Madden world. Whoever is your corner at the slot position number 1, okay, he will play over the number 1 rated wide receiver. So in that case, that would be Lockett. Okay, so Troy Hill right now is there. He's going to play over Lockett if I leave it alone. And then if I go back to the corner position, all right, even though Troy Hill is still here, he's actually not really counting, if I can say that correctly. David Long would basically be my new number 2 corner, right? Because Hill has a responsibility and that overrides everything. So Ramsey now, he's the number 1 corner. He's going to match up over the number 2 rated receiver, which is DK Metcalf. Skip Hill, right? Now Long is going to match up over whoever is the 3rd highest rated receiver. But I don't want that. I don't want that, okay? I want to double team DK Metcalf, right? And I want to double team Tyler Lockett, right? So what I'm going to do is this, all right? I'm going to move David Long to the number 1 position. I'm going to put Ramsey at that number 2 position, right? And then Troy Hill, it doesn't matter where he is because his job is already solidified as covering the number one wide receiver. David Long is going to cover the number 2 wide receiver, which would be DK Metcalf. Ramsey's going to be matched up on whoever the number 3 bum is at wide receiver because of the way I have it aligned. Does that make sense to you? It's a little bit different, but you have to understand how it works. So now let's jump into an actual play. Okay, I'm going to come out and a nickel set and play any type of man defense. Again, if you play zone defense, they still will align the way you have it set. But man is kind of the angle that I'm working with because I feel like that's where you can get the most bang for your buck when it comes to actually using the double teams. And I'm going to come out any 3 wide receiver set. Doesn't really matter. Okay. So on offense, let's find the guys. Okay. We have DK Metcalf at number 1 of screen on the left side. And we have Tyler Lockett at number 2. When I say number 2, he's the 2nd wide receiver. But he actually is the overall 1st best wide receiver who should be covered by who? Should be covered by Hill. Okay. And this could be kind of messed up because of the formation here. So Hill is actually covering DK Metcalf, and Long is covering Lockett. However, and that just could be because of the stack. I'm going to spread them out here, and it should correct itself. But Ramsey over here is covering the third best receiver, which is Marquise Goodwin. So now we're really looking good, because now over here we can just kind of like try to double team this look if we want to. All right, maybe not the best way to do this right now, but check this out. Right, you got basically 4 over 2, 2 double teams happening, and then you got single here with Ramsey. And just make sure you can always win your linebacker matchup as well. If that's an issue, you might want to double team the linebacker instead, right? So that's a whole nother video, but I wanted to preview it just to show you the advantage of using this type of defense. Let me kind of get into a different formation. Now you have to understand there are formations that make it really hard to cover wide receivers sometimes, and especially when they come out in stacks or bunches, that's pretty much what happens. So let's take a look at this. Cover 1. All right, so we got David Long, who should be matched up on, he's matching up on Lockett, and then what's his name is matching up on, okay, so let me tell you what's happening here. I've done this quite a few times today. Anytime you get receivers that are 1 point differential from each other, you can get this kind of, I don't want to call it a glitch, but you kind of get a little bit of a not perfect matchup. So, sorry, let's go to the wide receiver position. Let me just show you what I'm talking about. So Lockett and Metcalf are 1 point differential. And for some reason, the game kind of bugs out that way. So it doesn't treat Lockett as he's the number 1 receiver sometimes. So just understand that. Because technically it should be switched where Hill's playing over the top of Lockett. But for some reason, they have Hill playing over the top of DK Metcalf, which really doesn't matter, because really what we're just trying to do is get a lesser corner over these guys, over the top players, because we want to double team. We want to help out. We want to do stuff, right? We want to play all types of defenses where you might get help. You know, you can push the coverage that way. You see how it's working out here, right? But the most important thing is that I have Ramsey playing over Marquise Goodwin. And really, if there's any player that understands football, you probably don't want to throw into the double teams. And you're kind of forced to throw into the single team and the single coverage. And that's just really not a good idea either, because it's Ramsey. So trying to show you that. Sorry about that. I've had other examples with other teams. It works out fine when you have receivers that are more than 1 point differential. But just to show you the idea, I think you understand what we're trying to get done. And then when you're in depth chart now, you can easily flip out of it, right? You can easily be in depth chart and say, well, I don't like, it's not looking good. I'm going to now go back to balance, which puts your corners back in left and right, and then also slot. And then you can also go back to overall or speed, and the corners will just switch and just do what they have to do. But this is one part that I guarantee you that most people don't use, and I'm going to start using it more. I've been thinking about it for so long, but I just couldn't really figure out the way it worked, because it didn't match up. It didn't make sense to me, but now it does. And hopefully it does to you too. If you have any questions, concerns, comments, hit me up and we'll talk about this. But I think this is one of the best new things you can do, especially with man defense being so powerful this year. Talk to you later. Peace.